Hello, and welcome to Points of Change, the show that is all about those moments in life where we can turn things around and make changes to the positive. Now, I'm very happy that I'm being joined live in the live stream today by an expert in procrastination. So that's what we're going to be talking about, moving from procrastination into productivity is the theme of today's show. You will also have an opportunity to ask questions toward the end of the show, so we'll give you that opportunity as well. Type questions or comments into the chat box. Don't worry if we don't get to address them right away. We will come back to you when we can. So today's theme is procrastination to productivity. Let's get into it with our friend Eric Twiggs in just a moment. So let me welcome to Points of Change, Eric Twiggs. Eric is an expert, an author, and he has an incredible book which is called The Discipline of Now. He consults and speaks all over the place about how to beat procrastination. He has a foolproof formula for getting you out of procrastination and into activity. Please welcome to the show, Eric Twiggs. Hi, Eric.
Hi, John. Thank you for having me on your show. It's truly an honor.
It's an honor for me to have you on here. I've been looking forward to speaking to you for a while. And I think this is the first time that I've actually had someone on to specifically address the issue of procrastination. And I don't know if I've ever met anyone who doesn't ever procrastinate. I guess there might be people out there, but how common is it as a problem for people?
So there was a study that was done in Calgary, in Canada, and they concluded that 95% of the population has some type of an issue with procrastination. Now, John, I believe that the other 5%, they just haven't gotten around to completing the survey. That's how serious this thing is. But no, it is prevalent, this whole procrastination problem.
Yeah, and I certainly suffer with it as much as anyone else. What are the worst things that you hear from people who are struggling with this in terms of how it might be negatively impacting their lives?
So the challenge is people don't really realize that it's really that's the thing that's holding them back. I mean, even it's something as simple as they're paying more late fees because they're putting off paying bills. Right. They're waiting until the last minute to do presentations, and it's not going to be as good if you're not putting the time in the early stages of development. So the thing I like to say about procrastination, it's a silent killer. Right. Because you think you're getting away with it. Sometimes there's not an immediate negative consequence. It's not like the procrastination police come and arrest you. It's you think you're getting away with it. And then it makes it worse. What makes it worse is, let's say you do a presentation and you waited until the last minute and people are patting you on the back saying, "Oh, Eric, that was so great." Now you start telling yourself, "Oh, I work better under pressure. I work better when I wait until the last minute." So it's a serious problem that we need to get our arms around.
Indeed, we do. I have a theory about procrastination, Eric, and I want to get your input on it because I may be somewhere in the right ballpark, I hope, or I might be way off bat. So I'm really, really good to ask an expert on this. My theory is that procrastination is what ends up happening more as a default setting for people when they haven't practiced the art of proactivity or taking action on things sooner or later. You just tend to fall into this thing of, well, putting things off or doing them when you absolutely have to, rather than getting a head start on things. What do you feel on that? Is that somewhere in the right ballpark?
Yeah, I think there's some truth to that, because I feel like the easiest thing to do is nothing, right? And so that's why if you're not aware, and the theme of my book, the overarching theme of my book, The Discipline of Now, it's all about awareness. And being aware of what triggers you to procrastinate, because we said procrastination is a prevalent problem. But what I've also found is that I have yet to meet that person that procrastinates with everything in their life. Now, people say I always procrastinate. That's not really true, because I know people that procrastinate in professional settings, but they are spot on when it comes to something with their children or something around the house. So the key thing is to pay attention to your trigger points. And because, for example, a lot of people procrastinate on tasks that they just don't like to do, right? It's not that deep. It's not that complicated. They just don't enjoy the task. So for them, it's the easiest thing to do is nothing. So if you can recognize that about yourself, you can put things in place to where that thing gets done without you necessarily having to do it.
So delegation could be a good way, or planning sometimes is the thing. I often when I work with coaching clients, one of the things that I will sometimes teach them, especially if they're having difficulty in getting things done or getting things started, is holding themselves to a higher level of accountability by creating Ulysses pacts, where they kind of lock themselves into things, and they have such a high level of accountability for it that they just have to do it. Like for me, for example, when I first started doing martial arts training years ago, and it's 7 o'clock in the morning start time for training, you have to get up pretty early. So to make myself do that, I would always promise them the night before that I would see them at training the next day. And it's like, okay, well, I've promised I'm going to do that, so now I have to do it. And it's like, I don't have any trouble getting myself to the airport for an early morning flight, but for some reason, it was more of a challenge to do that thing, I guess because it was optional. But always, it's always something of, I always feel better afterwards. Is that something that you would recommend as well?
Yeah, I think accountability is critical. I think public accountability is, like, for example, when I ran a marathon back in 2017, I ran a marathon, and I purposely told people like a year in advance that I was running this marathon for the simple reason that I knew that people would be always asking me how my training was going. And there would be people like family members that would want to attend to support me. So it forced me to take the necessary actions. And I would also, if you can, put your money on the line. That's a big motivator. Like, I paid for the marathon
right
a year plus in advance, knowing I've got money on the line now. And you can do that in other areas if it's a workout program. But I think the key is just building in that public accountability. I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah. You mentioned to me that you have a very specific process that you take people through in helping them to move into more productivity, into beating procrastination. So what's the first step of that process that you start working with people on?
Yes. So it's called the Procrastination Prevention Pyramid. And this is one of the big things that separates my book from the others on the same topic. And this pyramid that I developed is based off of over 28,000 coaching sessions with executives and entrepreneurs. So the first step, if I'm looking at helping someone to overcome procrastination, the first rung on the pyramid is their attitude, how they think. This is the foundation of the pyramid, because your attitude is the foundation of your success. And so I remember I'd be working earlier in my coaching career, I'd be working with someone who may be struggling to get a financial result. And I kept beating the result. But I had to step back and look at the mindset and look at the beliefs and look at how they think. So the common thing with the attitude piece is 80% of the typical person's self-talk is negative. If you just listen to the thoughts that come to mind throughout the day, unchecked, 80% is negative. And that can turn you into a pessimist and make it more likely that you procrastinate. So you have to offset that. So you have to break that negativity habit. And the best way to break a bad habit is to replace it with a better one. And so one of the things I have people do is you have to start a win log, a WIN log. Right. And that's a sheet of paper, notepad. And throughout the day, you're tracking your wins. You're tracking your victories. You're tracking progress that you're making. And I'm telling you, I've had people that when we started this, they couldn't come up with a single win. But now they won't get up. They won't let me continue the conversation until we talk about all of their wins. So that the first step to overcoming procrastination is checking your attitude.
Yeah, I love that. I've read quite a few studies recently, in fact, on just how effective it is to celebrate those small wins and how much that can positively impact your mindset. I know for myself, certainly when I was younger, one of the things people would often comment to me on is that I never seemed to get enthusiastic about anything. And because of that, I think I was very low motivation on moving things forward. So I kind of drifted through many things in my life. I ended up being very lucky, considering that that was a very poor strategy. But it was only really when I started actually working on my mindset and realizing that enthusiasm was something I had to generate, that I had to turn it around myself, not expect it just to happen or that things should automatically be creating that for me. It had to come from me. That was a big lesson for me, and my motivation rocketed from there. So I really like what you're saying there. What else is going to help people to increase their productivity?
So the first step is attitude. That's the foundational rung on the pyramid. The next step is awareness. We talked about that's kind of the overarching theme, but being aware of your power times. And one of the things that just frustrated me to no end with some of these other productivity books is that they led you to believe that you're a loser if you don't wake up at 4 o'clock every morning.
Right.
That's what they lead you to believe.
Yeah.
But that's not the case. You can be a night owl and still be highly productive. You can be a morning person like I am and be highly productive. But here's the key. The key is to schedule your high priority activity during those times of day when you have the most energy. That's really the key. It's not so much about getting up at 4 and running a marathon before everybody else is woken up. Don't believe that hype. It's really about scheduling to your power times.
No, I like that because I know when I first started in the personal development industry more than 10 years ago, maybe around more like 15, 16 years back, that was very much what people seem to be teaching. Like you're almost like trying to get people to recondition themselves mentally into type A personality, go-getters, and having to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, like you're saying, and become this super achiever. And it's like, well, saying you can actually work more naturally with yourself and your own life rhythms and what works for you, but find those times where you have the energy, where your mind's clearer and you can actually do that and utilize them. What are some of the ways that you can best utilize those sorts of times, do you think?
So just for example, like for me, I know that I am a morning person. So I will do creative projects early. So the mistake I would make, John, is that I would wait until later in the evening and I would try to write something and do something creative and the ideas just weren't coming. And I thought I had writer's block. But then when I would try to write the same thing early in the morning, then all the ideas started to flow. And that's critical. Even if you schedule your day and you have a day full of meetings, I would try to do your most challenge. If you're a morning person, the meetings that require the most energy and effort, if you can schedule those during that time when your energy is at its peak.
Right.
And then try to schedule things when you know you don't have the energy, schedule lower activities that require lower output.
Right, which makes perfect sense. Like get the hard stuff out of the way whilst you're at your peak, and then the easier stuff is going to be easier to navigate as well. Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. And I love this idea of like not having to become this model of what a perfect producer and proactive person should look like. What else is included in your process, Eric?
So we've already talked about attitude. We've already talked about awareness. Now, again, in the book, I go much deeper and provide more examples and scenarios, but we're just kind of getting some of the basic things here. Yeah. So the third key is animation. And it's really about energy and always making sure that you're in a positive, doing things to make sure you're in a positive place as it relates to your energy. And if you go back to the time where you've been procrastinating the most, a lot of times it's when you're in a low energy state, where you're in a low energy cycle. So the key is looking at how much sleep are you getting? What types of food are you eating? Are you exercising? The exercise piece is big. I saw a study from Thomas Corley. He wrote the study on rich habits, and he studied all these wealthy entrepreneurs and concluded that like 80% of them have this workout habit where they work out at least 3 days a week, 30 minutes a day with cardio. Right. And the reason for that is because they recognize how important energy is. And like, I'm a big fan of naps. I'm a notorious nap taker.
Yeah.
And so for me, I know that I'm a morning person. And if I'm not totally aware, as we get later in the day, my energy will drain. And if I'm doing a podcast or I'm appearing on a podcast, that'll come out that my energy's low. So
Yeah.
I'll take naps and those types of things, and it helps to renew my energy. But really paying attention to your energy levels and doing things to make sure you're in a good place energy-wise.
I like that. Yeah, I believe in the power of napping so much that I created a little napping meditation corner in my office. So that's where I go. In fact, I say I nap. I tend to actually, rather than have a nap in the afternoon, I find that 20 minutes of meditation time actually has more or less the same effect for me, that I always come back feeling refreshed and alert after doing that. So it's like my productivity increases after that afternoon slump, and also it helps me keep my meditation practice daily as well. So I see a lot of power in that for people, and I know that sometimes here in Spain, the Spanish love their siestas, so it's nice to take that little bit of time out in the day, and most people don't do it. But I think that has been a lot of study showing that it has huge benefit. Even Google implemented nap pods into their business. I don't know if they're still doing that, but just so that if anyone was overly tired, rather than try and force yourself through a lack of productivity, go and take 20 or 30 minutes in the nap pod and then come back and be productive.
Oh, for sure. And the other thing, it's really about recovery. It's about understanding recovery. And one of the things I learned, remember I told you earlier, I ran a marathon.
Yeah.
And that's one of my takeaways from that experience, how important recovery is. Like you have to literally build in recovery to your plan. So for example, if you're looking to run a marathon, not only are you thinking about how do I run 26 miles, but what's my strategy for recovery as I'm training, so that when I go out the next day, I have energy and I can run and my legs are fresh. So it's the same thing in business. So working 13 hours nonstop isn't an ideal thing, contrary to popular belief. Just working nonstop. It's building in recovery. The reason why people burn out is because they're not building in that recovery. Recovery could be taking a vacation, but I think that's so critical as it relates to energy and animation.
Yeah, and also I think the way things often are set up, or the experiences people end up finding themselves having, that often they're trying to do a full-time job, or maybe more than one job, or they have their side hustle at the very least on top of that, and sometimes even with all of those things, still struggling to make ends meet. So it always feels like you have to do more and more, but the time has to come from somewhere, and often people do end up taking it from their recovery time, from their sleep time, or not having any time off from what they're doing at all. And it is a recipe for burnout, particularly. So then things like napping and meditation do, in my experience, do help with that. But I think you do also need some time away, some time that's just you by yourself, some stillness, some quiet, and a time to switch off your brain from the work stuff, right?
Oh, for sure. And like, I just look at me, like the times. So my wife, she forces me into a recovery program because she says, look, we need to go on vacation this year. We're taking the kids, we're going here. But I tell you what, when I go and I'm not even thinking about business, when I come back, it just seems like I have these extra ideas and my creativity's at a completely different level because of that whole concept of recovery.
Yeah, and I think the reason I tend to encounter from people as to why they don't do that is this feeling more of like it has to be now, and that everything has to happen as soon as possible. But also this guilt. I often hear people talking about this guilt they feel if they're not working on their business, or not working on turning up their income, or pushing something forward. They feel guilty for taking any time off whatsoever. We've kind of created, or I think from the 80s and 90s onwards, created this work culture of like that we're supposed to live for our jobs rather than work for a living. We live for our work, and it's the wrong way around. And to a point an extreme point in some cultures, like in Japan, they even have a name which I can't remember now, for death by overworking. And it's these sorts of things that take people down that path. Unfortunately, it's a very toxic culture.
No, I agree with that. And again, it goes back to just some of the misconceptions that are out there that, work is so glorified. Oh, I'm the hardest worker in the room. You won't outwork me. But I think there's a difference between being active and being effective.
Yeah.
You can be working and working and working, but how effective are you? So it's working on the right thing. That's also building in recovery. I mean, I think that's the key.
Yeah, so we need to stop working all the hours that God sends as a badge of honor, and so saying rather than trying to compete on how much we work, if you're going to compete in that way, then compete on your productivity, compete on what you can achieve, compete on your creativity. These things are perhaps far more important these days, especially if you are a business owner or a coach or a consultant or executive. You need to be able to have this level of flexibility and not just be doing some all-out push to maximum burnout, right?
Sure, absolutely.
So take us to the next step in your pyramid, Eric.
Good. So the next step is automation. And John, I wish what I'm about to say next, I wish someone would have told me this earlier in my career. It would have made my life much easier. And here it is, that just because something has to be done, it doesn't mean that you have to do it.
Yeah.
I wish I understood that earlier in my career. And
yeah,
so
me too.
the automation step is all about creating systems where certain things can get done so you don't have to touch them. Is
Right.
that delegating? Is that bringing on a virtual assistant? If you look at email, for example, that's one of the things that just frustrates people to no end. They just get bombarded with all these emails. Can you create systems within your email so certain emails are going right to certain folders? You don't have to process and touch everything, but really so the whole point of automation frees you up so you can stay in your zone of genius. That's a term I got from, there's a book out, it's called The Big Leap.
Gay Hendricks, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And he coined that phrase, the zone of genius.
Yeah.
And the zone of genius are those things that you are just uniquely equipped to do. It could be writing, it could be speaking, it could be coaching people, but ideally that's where you're spending the majority of your time. And some of the other tasks that these are tasks that need to be done, but you don't necessarily have to do them. You can set up systems so they're getting done and they free you up to focus on your zone of genius.
Right, which is fantastic and probably good news to many people. The business owners particularly are some of the worst, like self-employed people or small business owners are some of the worst, who do think you have to do everything yourself. You end up being a one-person band and you're trying to play all the instruments at once, and all you're really creating is a mess, really. And again, a path to burnout, because ultimately you have to find the time to deliver all these things, but it's a huge level of stress and burden to put upon yourself. I know that even for myself, at some points in business, you just get to a point where you're thinking, I can't handle these aspects of what I'm doing myself. I need to hire someone else to do it. Or I don't know how to do this and I need someone else's expertise to do it because I don't have the time to learn it. It just makes so much sense to leverage your time this way. What happened for you? I mean, I'm assuming you've done this for yourself. What kind of things have you done to help automate your own life and business?
Well, look, I'll give you an example. So years ago, back when I was working in a corporate setting, I had 500 employees. I had 17 locations. I had managers in each location. And so what would happen, let's say if there was a customer complaint in one of the locations, they would just give it, hey, yeah, you have to call Eric. Okay, you have to call Eric. So I would literally spend half of my day just talking to upset customers. And then I'd say, I didn't know, just because it has to be done doesn't mean that I have to be the one to do it. So finally, one day I said, look, I got my managers together and I said, you are responsible for dealing with these customers. This, and if it gets to me, I'm not going to take any time. I had a policy. If it gets to me, it's free. I'm not going to take any time to troubleshoot or problem solve. And I don't care if it costs you your bonus. I don't care if they went $10,000, but I'm just going to give it back to them. I'm not going to. And guess what? I never got a complaint again. And not only that, they made great decisions. I mean, some decisions that were better than I would have come up with. But that was an early lesson of the fact that, just because it has to be done, it doesn't mean that I have to do it. So can you delegate? Can you outline what people are empowered to handle on their own so that you're freed up to be in your zone of genius?
Right. I think that's a great example of placing a very necessary boundary around your time and energy that says, this is what, these are things I will deal with and what I do, because this is where, as you talked about zone of genius. I mean, these are the things that actually I don't really need to be doing it. And they take away from that. They use up brain power, they use up energy. Someone else could be doing this, and it doesn't need to be me. Leave me to focus on this stuff. So I think that's a super important part of it. I was thinking actually of a client I had ages ago, a very successful business owner, but she was really looking to take her business, her manufacturing company to another level. And the bottleneck, unsurprisingly perhaps, turned out to be her, because she was micromanaging, which is a similar kind of thing. It's very much related. She didn't trust her employees to do their own job. So she ends up trying to oversee and monitor as closely as possible what other people are doing, because she didn't feel that she could just leave them to go on with it. And we worked on this, but it's like, ultimately, it's like, I helped her to realize that was the big bottleneck in her business, but she wasn't prepared to do that. So, well, the whole time you're not prepared to do something about it, you are stuck here. If you can't learn to trust people and delegate properly and step away and let them do what they need to do, then you are going to still find yourself in these same problems, and you're never going to be able to scale as big as you want. So if growth and scalability and increased productivity are things you actually want, you have to do this, right?
Yes, for sure. So I think with entrepreneurs and high-level executives, sometimes your big strength is your big weakness, right? So your big strength is your ability to get things done, and your ability to make it happen. But your weakness is your ability to get things done, because you're like, nobody can do it like Eric.
Right.
And I know I can trust if I do it, but can I trust if I delegate this to Joe over here? So, and again, but it's about awareness and understanding. For you to get to your next level, you need to really be working more on your business and not as much in the business.
Of course. Yeah, perfect sense. So let's recap what we've covered so far in your pyramid.
Okay, great. So first we talked about attitude. Attitude is the foundation of the pyramid. It's the foundation of your success. Next, we talked about awareness, being aware of your power times. Then we talked about animation, really understanding how important energy is to overcoming procrastination, making sure that you build in recovery to your ultimate plan. The fourth step is automation. Just because it has to be done doesn't mean that you have to do it. Make sure you've got systems in place so that you can stay in your zone of genius.
Great. So there's a fifth step as well, right? So what's at the top of the pyramid, Eric?
At the top of the pyramid, John, is action, or actually it's activity, is the way I have it labeled. And the key thing is I've got it at the top of the pyramid because in order for you to get to the top, at some point you have to take action. That's why I have it up there. We can meditate. Meditation is important. You can have a vision board. I'm a big fan of vision boards. You can have mantras and sayings and all of that, but at some point you have to do something. And that's why action is at the top. But again, it's about taking the right action and focusing on the 20% of the actions that are going to get you the 80% of your results.
Okay, so that's the Pareto principle, yeah?
Yeah.
How do people do that? I mean, how do you get focused on what is the right kind of action and start figuring that out?
Well, you need to be clear on where you're trying to go. But one of the things I do is I have something that's called the Twiggs Top 5.
Okay,
right?
Cool.
Twiggs Top 5. So every day I've got a 3x5 card. Like if you ever see me, I've always got a 3x5 card that's in my shirt pocket or what have you. And so what I do is at the end of my day, I write down the 5 critical things that have to be done for the following day. And these 5 critical things are things that align with where I want to go. These are 5 things that are going to help me move forward. Now, in that moment, there may be little steps, but I can always align them with where I'm trying to go. So I write them out the night before. And the night before is critical because it allows your subconscious mind to go to work. Because sometimes you may write something down and think, oh, how am I going to do that? But then when you wake up, you've got ideas on how you're going to do that. And I feel compelled. Anytime I write something on the paper, I'm going through my day, I feel compelled to get it done. And it's like there's something to be said for when you write something and how it links to your brain and it links to your subconscious. So that's how I stay focused on taking the right action on a daily basis.
Yeah. So would you recommend people could use things like I use a list making app and things like that. I use Todoist, which gives you reminders of the tasks that you schedule in. Do you think those sorts of things are helpful?
Sure. Yeah, I think reminders are helpful. I can just say for me, it works better to write things down when it comes to that. It just creates more of an imprint on the brain. But I'm a big fan of making appointments with yourself. Right. So instead of saying, I'm going to write a blog post this week, I would say I'm going to write a blog post on Tuesday at 1:00. From 1:00 to 2:00, I'm going to be writing this blog post, and then I would schedule it. So if it's using an app, if it's just using Google Calendar, I would schedule it and setting a reminder, because I do find that when you put it on the calendar, the chance of you actually doing it goes up by like 80%.
Yeah, massively. I think that is the moment at which it changes from being an intention to being a scheduled activity.
Yes.
And because I often get asked about what's the difference between your plan of action and your actual actions. It's like, well, this is the difference. Being specific about exactly what you're going to do, when you're going to do it, where you're going to do it, what you need to do it, as much detail as you can put in, but actually have it on your calendar as well. Then it becomes a commitment. Then it becomes an actual action that you're going to do, rather than just, well, yeah, I'm going to do that this week. That may not actually happen. So yeah, I think that's a really important key to the puzzle. Have some specificity, commit yourselves to time, make an appointment with yourself, because we tend to honor our appointments with other people, hopefully. But if we can't honor our own appointments with ourselves, then maybe we don't have too much chance of keeping bigger commitments outside of that, right?
Sure. And I tell you, like, I've worked with quite a few clients, and when we first started talking, they would say, Eric, I just had this procrastination problem. And the first thing I would have them do is start making appointments with themselves. And they tell me that just that step has helped them to not procrastinate like they were procrastinating before. So it really made it a lot better, just that one habit.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, what have been some of the best results you've seen in people that you worked with and spoken to, or have been using your method?
Yeah, so I mean, I have a client in particular that comes to mind who we would talk, and he's one of the reasons that I started having people write down their wins, because we would talk and he would always tell me about everything that was going wrong and how, the economy, it's an election year, blah, 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 blah. And finally, I'm like, stop. Okay. From now on, you're going to tell me what you're grateful for. When we start our sessions, you have to begin our sessions with what you're grateful for. And at first we started that, and it was like pulling teeth, getting on the thick of things. Yeah. But over time, I mean, it just kept flowing and flowing and flowing. And again, it got to a point where if I didn't start the session that way, he would always catch me and say, hey, no, you didn't ask me what I was grateful for today. Hey, and it helped to turn his business around. When we first started this, he had to be there, and he was stuck in the weeds. And months later, the business started doing better. He was there a lot less. He was focused on some of his other side businesses, and the business was doing better without him being there.
It's interesting to me, because I mean, from what you're describing there as well, it's this situation of we get very pulled into everything that's going on in the world, and in news, politics, and life and gossip and all sorts of things. There's a lot of dramas and things going on that we can easily be pulled into. But just with something like a practice of gratitude, you have to start turning the focus inwards a bit, which is, I think, one of the things we don't always do or don't often do. And I taught and done presentations over the years on how I feel that gratitude saved my life and turned things around. So I do think it's a key part of this. But it is just having that awareness. And the more you start to think in those terms, the more you will start to look for or even create things to be grateful for, and see more of that in your life and appreciate everything you've got, rather than being in this sort of downward spiral of everything's falling apart, the world's going to hell in a handbasket. Get refocused on actually there's still so many good things to focus on in the life. Whilst we're alive, whilst we can enjoy these things, we're just robbing ourselves of joy and success and fulfillment if we're not doing that.
And here's what you tend to get more of whatever you track.
Right.
So if you start tracking gratitude, you start finding things to be grateful for. And these things were always there, but now you're tracking it and you're paying attention to it, so you get more of it.
Yeah. Some of the biggest personal growth things for me have been to track my gratitude with daily journaling. I use the 5-minute journal. I also use the productivity journal from Intelligent Change, both the same company. And so every day I'm sort of putting down my tasks and the things that I'm going to do, and tracking how much time I spend doing these things as well, and reviewing that, planning my tasks for the week ahead, and then reviewing at the end of the week, what did I get done, what didn't get done, celebrating the wins. I think they're incredibly powerful tools. Your method is even simpler, just a 3x5 card in your pocket to help you keep track of things and write down what you're going to do the next day and make those appointments for yourself, put in your calendar. It doesn't have to be complicated, but there are so many tools out there that could help you with this as well.
Yeah, what I find is it helps to build your confidence too. Because number one, you know that you're keeping your promises to yourself. And that's the key. If you want to build confidence, get in the habit of, if you say you're going to work out, you work out. Now you're starting to build confidence. Now you're starting to build momentum. But yeah, and the other thing is that you get, because there's always that sneaking thought in your mind where you're thinking, is there something else that I could be doing? But when look, here are my 5 priorities. I did the 5 things. I know I'm doing what it is that I need to do. Yeah. So it helps you that way as well.
Do you think maybe some people perhaps resist the push into action because they're worried that they're going to have to suddenly transform everything in their lives or become a type A overachiever?
Yeah, I think sometimes there's a self-confidence issue where it's like, I'm just not that person. I'm not, I don't know if I can do that. Or I don't know, or sometimes it even can be like a fear of success, right? Which is common. I mean, a lot of people who, okay, what if I can't measure up to whatever the demands of the next level call for? So what if I do this presentation and it goes great and they want me to do another one? And it's like, oh, I don't have another one. I just had that one.
Right.
But the whole key, and I always teach this to people, it's a formula that's be, do, and have. So if I can become more, I can do more. If ultimately I can do more, then I can have more.
Yeah.
So it all starts with becoming. This is a constant thing where you're always looking to get better. And if you're always getting better, you don't have to worry about what the next level is going to bring because you'll be prepared.
Yeah. I think too many people spend far too much time worrying about what other people think of them, and I think this often holds people back. I work a lot with people in public speaking and presentation skills, so this is something I see all the time with people, like often the fear of presenting or public speaking or putting yourself out there in any capacity is that of embarrassing yourself and maybe even being shamed and shouted down by people. And yet, realistically, sometimes we have to go through some of these awkward or embarrassing experiences to get the growth. We don't get there without some of the hard work and effort that goes into it, which unfortunately is the message that not everyone wants to hear. But your plan of action with a good, starting off with a good mindset, which I love, and that's such a critical place to start, and then building out practically to doing everything that's going to support you to take action and the right kind of action. It just sounds fantastic. So I really like what you're teaching about becoming more proactive and beating procrastination. It sounds like a fantastic system. For anyone who's watching or listening who wants to find out more about you, you have a website, yeah?
Yes. So you can go to thedisciplineofnow.com. It's the same title as the book, thedisciplineofnow.com. And you can pick up a copy of the book, The Discipline of Now, 12 Practical Principles to Overcome Procrastination. It's available in audio and paperback and as an ebook as well.
Well, definitely don't put off checking that out and getting a copy of Eric's book as well. It sounds fantastic. I want to check it out myself. I love hearing more about this. I think it's such an exciting area to work on. Eric, is there anything else people should know or that you want to share before we wrap things up for today?
Yeah, something else too. I'm the president of the What Now movement. And this is a movement we started at the beginning of the pandemic, because I would meet people who maybe was somebody that was a stand-up comedian, and they would say, I can't go to the comedy club anymore because it's closed. So I'm just going to wait until things get back to normal. Now, you don't wait. The key is pivoting. And so we started, and this is really in line with my mission to overcome procrastination. Myself and my two business partners, Ted Fells and Dr. Sharon H. Porter, we started the What Now movement. And it's a Facebook group that you can join. You can interact with me directly, but we provide daily tools and videos to inspire you to pivot and always keep moving and ask yourself. So the question you should always ask if you come up against a challenge is, what now? If you ask yourself that question, it helps you to pivot towards what's possible.
I think it's vitally important to always be asking yourself good questions. So what now, what next? Yeah, definitely a good thing to be thinking about. Good. So I'll make sure that there's some information on that in the show notes, so that for the YouTube video, for people watching the replay as well, so you can quickly access that as well and go and check out Eric's Facebook group and find out more about that. It's been a real pleasure chatting to you, Eric. I'm so glad we were able to arrange this. What are you going to be proactive about today?
Well, I am going to be proactive. I'm going to be writing. I've got a little article piece that I'm working on. I'm going to be writing that on some of my procrastination prevention principles. So I'm definitely excited about that. And also, I'm going to be recording an episode of the 30-Minute Hour podcast. So those are two things I'm really excited about.
Excellent stuff. Well, we'll have all the information on how you can find out more about Eric and get in touch with him as well. Check out his book, his Facebook group, and podcasting. And we'll be back with more very, very soon. Thanks for joining us today on Points of Change. It's been a real joy. Thanks, Eric.
Thank you, John.